Imagine waking up, stepping into your own backyard, and seeing the HOA president already floating in your pool, sunglasses on, lemonade in hand, like she paid the mortgage instead of you. That was my life. Every single week. I'm a 62-year-old man who worked his whole life for a quiet home, a little privacy, and a backyard oasis to enjoy in peace. But apparently, according to her, our infamous HOA Karen, my pool was a shared community asset. She'd waltz in through my gate without knocking, spread out her towels, turn on loud music, and act like I should be grateful she chose my yard over the crowded community pool. And every time I told her to stop, she'd smirk and say, "Relax. HOA has authority here." That's when I snapped. So I bought something. Not a fence, not a lock, something far more unforgettable. And after one single encounter, she never stepped foot near my pool again, not even close. Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? And don't forget to subscribe for more insane HOA stories. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you already know one universal truth. There's always one person who takes the title HOA president as if it's a crown bestowed by royalty. In my neighborhood, that royalty was Karen Blonde, Bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard welded to her hand like an extension of her soul. And the more power she believed she had, the less she thought any rule applied to her. After that ridiculous morning when she claimed my pool was part of her oversight duties, things only spiraled downward from there. At first I thought maybe she'd embarrassed herself enough to stay away for a while. Let things cool off, let her ego recalibrate, but no. Karen was not built like other humans. She was built like a malfunctioning robot programmed to enforce rules she invented 5 minutes ago. And within days she was back, this time with a brand new excuse. I was trimming my hibiscus bushes when I saw her strutting up my driveway with that predatory smile she used whenever she planned on ruining my day. "Good morning, resident," she said, emphasizing the word like I was some transient squatting on her estate. I wiped my hands on my shorts and braced myself. "What now, Karen?" She gave a dramatic sigh. "Just doing a community compliance walk. As president of the HOA, it's my responsibility to inspect shared amenities." I looked around as if I might spot a public park or a community clubhouse behind me. "Shared amenities?" I asked. "You mean my yard?" She lifted her chin. "If it's visible from any neighboring property, it falls under HOA review." "It's not visible," I said. "There's a 6-foot privacy fence." "Well, that's your interpretation." She scribbled something onto her clipboard. "I'll need access to the pool for safety verification." "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gesture. I simply said the word. Karen reacted like I'd slapped her into the next dimension. "Excuse me," she blinked dramatically. "You heard me." "No." Her mouth pressed flat. "You don't get to deny the HOA." I leaned on my hedge trimmer. "Karen, for the last time, my pool is not community property, and neither is my backyard." She gasped as if I'd committed treason. "I'll be speaking with the board." She said that so often I'm surprised it wasn't embroidered on her doormat. But she turned and stomped away, making sure each step was loud enough to communicate her displeasure to anyone within 3 houses. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. I was a fool. Because 2 days later, I caught her in my yard again. This time she'd let herself in through the side gate, the same way she always did. Apparently knocking was too much commitment. And even worse, she was wearing a bright pink swimsuit, reclining on my pool float, the one my granddaughter bought me for Father's Day. My eye twitched. I walked outside and cleared my throat. "Karen." She pretended not to hear me. "Karen." She put on headphones. I stepped closer. "Take the headphones off." She removed one ear cup and glared at me. "Do you mind? I'm in the middle of my relaxation therapy." The HOA Wellness Committee encourages self-care. I took a deep breath. "Karen, you're trespassing." She waved dismissively. "No, I'm not. I'm monitoring water clarity. You're floating on a flamingo floaty. It's called hands-free assessment." She turned her face to the sun. "Very advanced technique. If sarcasm could melt concrete, my driveway would have liquefied under my feet. Get out of my yard, Karen." She sat up on the float and narrowed her eyes. "I'll have you know this pool barely meets minimum safety standards. If anything, I'm doing you a favor. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" I barked a laugh. "For breaking into my yard, for using my pool whenever you feel like it, for acting like you own the place." Karen crossed her arms. "Well, someone has to maintain order around here, and that someone is not you, not in my yard." She gave a smug smile, the kind entitled people reserve for moments when they believe they've won an argument through sheer audacity. And even worse, she was wearing a bright pink swimsuit reclining on my pool float, the one my granddaughter bought me for Father's Day. My eye twitched. I walked outside and cleared my throat. Karen. She pretended not to hear me. Karen. She put on headphones. I stepped closer. Take the headphones off. She removed one ear cup and glared at me. Do you mind? I'm in the middle of my relaxation therapy. The HOA Wellness Committee encourages self-care. I took a deep breath. That afternoon, I received 3 separate HOA emails from Karen. Unapproved vegetation growth alongside pathway, my potted basil, suspicious activity in backyard, me watering my plants, untidy pool area needing inspection, her mess. Each email ended with the same line, failure to comply may result in fines. That's when I knew the situation was escalating into something dangerous, well, dangerous for my sanity. Karen wasn't just entitled, she was weaponizing her position. She wanted control, she wanted power, and worst of all, she wanted my pool. A few neighbors eventually approached me, some apologetic, some embarrassed. Old Mrs. Cunningham whispered, "I'm so sorry, dear. She told us your pool filter was a community hazard." Tom from next door sighed. She told me she was performing a routine safety dive with a margarita. Seriously. Even the teenagers across the street snickered about seeing her climb over my fence in a caftan like she was entering a private spa. Everyone knew what she was doing, and everyone knew she thought she could get away with it. And the truth is, and she almost did, because the final straw didn't come from her breaking into my yard, or using my towels, or calling my pool the community lagoon, or threatening to fine me for non-cooperation. No. It happened the day she showed up with 2 of her girlfriends holding iced coffees, wearing giant sun hats and saying, "We'll only be a couple hours. Don't fuss." That was the moment my patience, my precious carefully preserved patience, finally cracked, like thin ice under a heavy boot. I stared at them. They stared back. And I realized something deep in my bones. These people weren't going to stop. Not unless I made them stop. Politely asking pointless. Explaining property rights completely lost on them. Threatening to call the police. They laughed. Literally laughed. So, that night, after they left wet footprints all over my patio, after their sunscreen stained my pool tiles, after Karen declared, "We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9. For another session, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and typed the words, "How to stop trespassers from using your private pool." And that search led me down a rabbit hole that would change everything. Motion sensors, barbed wire, electric locks, loud alarms, security patrols, even trained geese, apparently. But the thing that caught my eye, the thing so absurd, yet so terrifying that I knew it was perfect, was something I never expected. Something realistic, something primal, something nature designed to keep people out of water. And when I saw it, I smiled, because HOA Karen had finally met her match. The morning after my late-night research session, I stepped out onto my patio with a cup of coffee. I wasn't expecting peace. Karen had trained me out of that, but I wasn't expecting a committee either. Yet there they were, Karen standing proudly in my backyard, clipboard in hand. Behind her 2 HOA board members, Gary and Susan, both looking apologetic and uncomfortable, like they'd been dragged here against their will. Mayaf dropped. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She turned to me with a sugary smile that did not match the situation. "Good morning, resident. We're performing an official HOA assessment of potential amenity expansion." Gary and Susan nodded, weakly, glancing at each other. "Amenity expansion? Oh no." I felt my pulse spike. "Karen," I said carefully, "I did not authorize anyone to come onto my property." She waved a dismissive hand. "No authorization needed. The HOA board has full jurisdiction to inspect communal assets." Communal. "This is my private pool." "Well," Karen tipped her head to the side. "That's currently under review." "Under review," I repeated. "Under review by who? You by the HOA," she corrected, though it was obvious she meant herself. I could see Gary shifting from foot to foot. He cleared his throat. "Look, it's not really under review." Karen cut him off with a death glare sharp enough to slice concrete. "We are reviewing it, Gary. Don't contradict me in front of a resident." He shrank like a scolded child. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Karen, you can't just decide my pool is public property because you like swimming in it." "Like swimming in it." She laughed as if I'd told a joke. "Oh, please. This is about safety, liability, and community cohesion." "Susan," I said, turning to her, "you do know she's trespassing, right?" Susan looked like she might cry. She whispered, "We didn't want to come." She said it was mandatory. Karen clapped loudly. Focus. We need to check the pool depth, water quality deck, sturdiness, and overall compliance with the HOA Recreational Standard Manual. Page 743, subsection 5, I snapped. Stop talking. The words came out louder than I intended. Karen froze mid-sentence, eyes widening as if someone had unplugged her. Karen, I continued, this is my property. You do not have the authority to be here. She lifted her chin. Oh, but I do. You see, your fence isn't compliant with HOA visibility guidelines. What does that even mean? It means, she said smugly, that because a portion of your pool area is visible from my second-story window, this space falls under shared community jurisdiction. I blinked slowly. Because you can see my pool, that makes it yours. She nodded, matter-of-factly. Yes, exactly. My voice cracked into a laugh. I couldn't help it. Karen, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Her face twisted into something between outrage and triumph. Mocking an HOA official is grounds for disciplinary review. Disciplinary what? She turned and scribbled furiously on her clipboard, muttering, hostile attitude, non-compliant behavior, potential fine recommendation. I threw my hands up. You can't fine me for being annoyed that strangers are standing in my backyard. Karen ignored me. Gary, measure the pool. Susan, water sample. Susan stared at her. You want me to get in his pool? Karen's voice sharpened. Are you refusing an HOA directive? Gary whispered. Karen, this isn't legal. She snapped around so fast her neck cracked. Gary, you are an HOA board member. You will do what is necessary to protect our community standards. Now measure the pool. He sighed, defeated, and took out a measuring tape. I stepped forward. Gary, don't touch anything. He froze tape dangling from his hand. Karen stepped between us. Listen, I tried to warn you. If you don't cooperate with the HOA, we may be forced to classify your property as non-compliant and bring it under community management. I stared. You mean take it? She didn't deny it. And that was the moment I finally realized the depth of her entitlement. She wasn't trespassing because she enjoyed the pool. She wasn't harassing me because she was bored. No. Karen fully believed she was above property laws. She believed my home was an extension of the HOA that she ruled. With my silence, she took that as permission to go further. I've also received several complaints, she said lightly, about your unneighborly attitude. I snorted. Complaints from WHO, she smiled sweetly. Anonymous sources. There were no anonymous sources. There was only Karen and the delusional kingdom in her head. Then she dropped the bomb. Based on ongoing concerns, she said the board may soon vote on converting your pool into an HOA-run shared amenity. My blood turned cold. You can't do that, I said sharply. Oh, but we can. The HOA has the authority to reassign community resources as needed. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Karen, my pool is not a community resource. She met my stare with pure arrogance. It will be. That was it. That was the moment all patience vanished from my body like steam off boiling water. I dealt with trespassing. I dealt with harassment. I dealt with her stupid flamingo floaty. But this was a threat to take something I worked for, paid for, maintained, and cherished, just because she liked being in control. This wasn't a battle over a pool anymore. It was a battle over boundaries. Over respect. Over dignity. She had crossed every line and she was ready to cross more. Something in me clicked into place. A switch. A calm, cold determination. I looked Karen dead in the eye. You want to make this a war? I asked softly. Fine. Let's make it a war. She smirked. Oh, sweetheart, you don't want to fight the HOA. I returned the smile. A different smile. One that made her eyes flicker with a brief, confused fear. Oh, Karen, I said quietly, I'm not fighting the HOA. I'm fighting you. She stiffened, stunned. I wasn't cowering. And that's when I made the decision that would change everything. The decision that would send her running, screaming, humiliated beyond repair. The decision that led me to buy something so horrifying, so realistic, so perfectly engineered, that even I questioned whether it was safe to put in my pool. Karen didn't know it yet, but her reign was over. I don't consider myself a vengeful man. At 62, I've lived long enough to know that revenge usually brings more headaches than satisfaction. But after weeks of enduring Karen's trespassing, her threats, her clipboard theatrics, and her growing obsession with my pool, I found myself sitting at the dinner table late one night with a single, undeniable truth buzzing in my chest. If I didn't put an end to her behavior once and for all, she was going to take more than just my peace. She was going to take control. And people like her, people who think rules bend to their liking, don't stop unless they crash into a wall they can't climb. I sat there with my laptop open, scrolling through forums, reading articles, watching videos titled things like How to Keep Wildlife Out of Your Yard and Best Deterrents for Intruders. Most of the advice was either impractical or straight up insane. One forum suggested installing a motion-activated siren. Another recommended smearing coyote urine near the fence. A third said I should buy a pair of aggressive geese, which, judging from the videos, looked more dangerous than any intruder I'd ever encounter. But then I found it. Buried deep in a thread about keeping herons away from koi ponds, someone posted a photo that made me stop scrolling. Floating on the surface of a pond was the most realistic fake alligator I had ever seen. The picture looked like it had been taken in a swamp in Florida. The details were terrifying: the shiny, glass-like eyes, the dark scales, the rigid jawline barely above water. It didn't look like a decoration, it looked alive. I clicked the link. The listing described it as a hyper-realistic floating predator decoy. Golf courses used it, private lakes used it, even some police departments used it for training. It came in 3 pieces: a head, a midsection, and a tail, each floating independently, so the water currents made them move like an actual gator. There were dozens of reviews saying things like, "Scared my husband half to death, and the mailman refuses to walk past our yard now. $40. Only $40 to end Karen's reign of terror." I sat back in my chair and pictured her strutting into my backyard the way she always did, ready to plop herself onto one of my lounge chairs, only to spot a 6-foot alligator staring back at her with cold, reptilian eyes. I don't care how entitled you are. Every human on Earth has a primal part of their brain that screams run when a predator stares at them. For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. I hit buy now. The next 2 days crawled by at the speed of continental drift. Every noise outside made me look toward the driveway, praying it was the delivery truck. Meanwhile, Karen was more unbearable than ever. She marched down the street with her clipboard like a dictator inspecting her kingdom. She cornered me once to announce in front of 3 neighbors that she had escalated the pool situation to formal review, whatever that meant. Then she smirked at me and said, "Don't worry. I'll make sure you still get visiting privileges once the HOA reorganizes usage." I didn't respond. I just nodded because the whole time I was picturing her face when she finally met my $40 reptile. When the package finally arrived, I carried the oversized box into the garage like it contained a nuclear device. I sliced it open, peeled back the cardboard, and froze. This thing was horrifying. Even in pieces, it looked real. The head was the worst. The glassy eyes gleamed like they were following me around the room. The ridges along the snout felt rough under my fingers. The body segments were painted with a gradient of mossy greens and oily browns. It was a masterpiece of fear. I laughed under my breath. "Karen, you're done." That evening, when the sun was just low enough to cast soft shadows across the backyard, I carried the gator out to the pool. I clipped the segments together, set them in the water, and stepped back as the gentle ripple of the water brought it to life. The head drifted, turning ever so slightly. The tail followed behind with a lazy, predatory sway. It looked so real, I almost convinced myself I'd made a terrible mistake. Even my neighbor's dog Harley spotted it through a crack in the fence and started barking like the apocalypse had arrived. Good. Perfect. That's exactly the reaction I was hoping for. I positioned myself inside the house, coffee in hand, sitting by the window that had the perfect view of the pool. I didn't have to wait long. Karen operated on a predictable schedule, entitlement runs like a German train system. Sure enough, right at 1013 the next morning, she marched toward the side of my house like she was the sheriff coming to shut down an illegal saloon. She didn't even knock. She flipped open my side gate and strutted inside with her beach bag swinging at her hip. She didn't look around. She didn't hesitate. She didn't think for a single second that maybe trespassing wasn't a good idea. She walked straight toward the pool. I took a sip of coffee. She set her towel down. She pulled out her sunscreen. She was mid-sentence complaining about the state of maintenance when she finally noticed it. She froze. She blinked. She leaned forward just a little. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. Then her entire body jerked backward like she'd been electrocuted. "What is that?" Her voice cracked so sharply I nearly spit out my coffee. She slapped a hand over her mouth, staggered, pointed at the pool with trembling fingers, and let out a shriek that could have shattered glass. It echoed across the neighborhood. She backpedaled, tripped over her own feet, and fell straight onto her backside with a thud. The alligator slowly drifted toward her, carried by the motion of the water. Karen screamed again, scrambling backward like a crab on ice. She was shaking so violently her sandals flew off. her face twisted into pure animal panic, the kind you can't fake even if you tried. Then, something happened, something so unexpected and so gloriously humiliating that I swear I will remember it on my deathbed. She peed, right there, on my pool deck, in front of God and the squirrels and probably 3 security cameras. A spreading puddle formed beneath her, as she whimpered, eyes locked on the floating reptile, like it was about to lunge out of the water and drag her into the underworld. I covered my mouth, not out of sympathy, no, to keep from choking on laughter. She scrambled to her feet, screaming for help, slipping as she tried to run, nearly falling into the pool again before finally making it out of my yard like a drunken cartoon character. She sprinted down the street barefoot, sopping wet, terrified, and leaving a dripping trail behind her like a slug of pure chaos. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "Worth every penny." Little did I know, Karen was far from done. She was about to escalate this into something even more insane. I honestly thought that after the alligator incident, after the screaming, the slipping, the flailing, the public urination, Karen would crawl back into her house, lock the door, and avoid my property for the rest of her natural life. I imagined she might even resign from the HOA out of sheer humiliation, maybe move to another state, maybe join a monastery, anything that involved staying far, far away from me and my pool. But no, I underestimated her capacity for delusion. I underestimated her talent for turning her own embarrassment into righteous fury. I underestimated how fast an HOA Karen can switch from terrified prey to furious predator when her pride is wounded. It began with a knock on my front door. Not a polite knock, not a neighborly knock. It was the kind of knock you hear when someone's trying to raid your house for overdue taxes. I opened the door just a sliver, and there she was. Her hair was still damp from the pool. Her mascara was smudged. Her clothes clung awkwardly to her body. She looked absolutely destroyed, and somehow angrier because of it. "You," she shouted before I even opened the door fully. "You tried to kill me," I blinked slowly. "Karen, you walked into my yard. You used my pool. You fell in my water. And you screamed because of a plastic decoy." "It looked real," she snapped. "You can't just put a deadly animal in your pool." "It isn't deadly," I corrected calmly. "It's not even an animal. It's 60% hollow plastic." She jabbed a finger at my chest. "You set a trap. You intentionally placed a wild predator to attack me." "I placed it," I agreed. "But the only thing it attacked was your ego." Her face turned a shade of red I didn't think human skin was capable of producing. She began pacing on my porch like she was preparing to deliver a courtroom speech. "You are in violation of HOA statutes concerning hazardous items, resident endangerment, and malicious tampering with community resources." I couldn't help myself. I laughed. Out loud, right in her face. It was involuntary. It was also the wrong thing to do because her expression twisted into something feral. "Don't laugh at me," she shrieked. "I'm filing a formal complaint. I'm calling the police. I'm calling animal control. I'm calling FEMA if I have to." "Go ahead," I said. "Tell them the inflatable alligator hurt your feelings," she sputtered. "It's not inflatable, it's still fake. It could have been real, but it wasn't." "Oh, I'm calling the police right now," and she did, right there, standing on my porch like the queen of chaos. She whipped out her phone, dialed 911, and I will never forget the words that came out of her mouth. "Yes, hello, I need emergency assistance. My neighbor placed a live alligator in his pool to deliberately harm me." I facepalmed so hard my glasses nearly flew off. And yet she kept going. "Yes, it is enormous. At least 6 feet long. It tried to attack me. I barely escaped with my life." She was pacing, now waving her free hand dramatically like she was narrating a true crime reenactment. "Yes, send officers right away. This man is dangerous. He has malicious intent. He set up a natural predator to trap me." I heard the dispatcher through the phone, not the words, just the tone. The ma'am. What tone? Karen didn't like that one bit. "No, I am not confused. No, I did not imagine it. Why would I lie about something so serious?" I had several reasons, but I kept them to myself. Karen hung up and glared at me triumphantly as if she'd just summoned an army. "The police will be here soon," she sneered, "and when they see what you've done, you're going to regret ever messing with the HOA." I sipped my coffee. "Great, I'll prepare snacks." She stormed off my porch and stood dramatically at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, shaking with watery rage, waiting for the cops like they were her personal hit squad. And then, they arrived. 2 officers pulled up quietly, stepping out with the weary look of men who had dealt with one too many neighborhood disputes that week. Karen rushed them like they were Navy SEALs landing on a battlefield. "Officers, thank God you're here. He put a deadly alligator in his pool and tried to kill me." The officers exchanged a glance. "The taller one?" asked Ma'am. "A real alligator." "Yes," she screamed. "It lunged at me. I couldn't stop myself." "It didn't lunge. It floated. Gently." The shorter officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, please stay calm. Where's the animal now?" Karen pointed toward my backyard with a trembling finger. "In there, waiting, watching, plotting. Even the officers had to suppress smirks. Sir, one said to me, 'May we take a look?' Of course," I said. "Watch your step. The only thing dangerous back there is my patience." We walked to the backyard, and there it was. The alligator drifting peacefully across the pool surface, looking as plastic as it truly was. The tall officer snorted. The short officer rubbed his forehead. "It's a decoy," he murmured. Karen gasped, as if betrayed by her own life choices. "No," she screamed. "It's real. It chased me." "It doesn't even have legs, ma'am," the officer replied dryly. "Yes, it does," she insisted. "There, under the water. It's hollow," he said. "How do you know?" He tapped it with his baton. It made a hollow clunk sound. Karen's mouth fell open. Her face flickered between confusion, humiliation, and denial. "This is illegal," she tried again. "He did this to terrorize me," the officer shrugged. "Ma'am, this is private property. He's allowed to have decorations." "It's not a decoration," she screamed. "It's a weapon." "If it's a weapon," the officer said, "it's the slowest one I've ever seen." Karen deflated. She sagged. Her rage collapsed under its own weight. The officers turned to me. "Sir, you're within your rights. She, however, is trespassing." The tallest officer addressed Karen sternly. "Ma'am, you cannot enter his yard again. Do you understand?" Karen mumbled something incoherent. "No," the officer pressed. "Say the words." She swallowed. "I won't trespass again." I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then she added under her breath, "For now." The look the officer gave her could have peeled paint. They escorted her off my property and she stomped home dripping with defeat, wounded pride, and chlorine. I watched her go and I should have felt victorious, but instead I felt the unmistakable chill of foreboding. Because something told me Karen wasn't done. She was embarrassed. She was exposed. And people like her don't retreat quietly. They retaliate. And that night I was proven right. I should have known that humiliation alone wouldn't stop Karen. People like her don't accept reality, they rebuild it in their own minds. And in Karen's mind, she wasn't a trespasser who had just embarrassed herself in front of half the neighborhood. No, she was the victim of a deadly reptile conspiracy orchestrated by her unhinged neighbor. That night, while I sat on my porch, enjoying the peaceful silence she had left behind, she sat inside her house, brewing a storm that was headed straight for me. It started subtly, lights flickering in her windows long past midnight, shadows pacing back and forth. The shape of her silhouette arguing on the phone, arms waving, fingers stabbing the air, head jerking in outrage. Her blinds slapped open and shut every few minutes like she was checking to make sure the alligator hadn't crawled onto land and come for her. By the time I went to bed, I had the uneasy sense that something was being planned and that I wasn't going to like it. I was right. The next morning I woke to the sound of her voice shrieking outside. Not a scream of fear this time, but a scream of indignation, the war cry of an HOA president wronged. I walked out to my front porch, and there she was storming down the sidewalk with her clipboard under her arm like a general marching into battle. Her hair was still wild from the chaos of the previous day, and she was wearing oversized sunglasses large enough to hide a small country behind them. She stopped in front of my mailbox and planted her fists on her hips. "You think you're clever," she growled. I sipped my coffee. "No, I think I'm tired. You set a trap to terrorize a member of this community. You trespassed into my yard again. It was a safety inspection, Karen. You were wearing a swimsuit." Her nostrils flared. "A swimsuit is appropriate attire for aquatic hazard assessment." That sentence alone told me she was fully detached from reality. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You want to play games? Fine. But I don't lose games. I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm just trying to live in my house without you treating my property like a public park." "Oh, that's where you're wrong." She jabbed her finger at me with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, and actually believed it meant something. "I've spoken to the HOA board. We are reviewing new safety regulations. Regulations that may require immediate access to your property." "You mean another excuse to trespass?" "I mean enhanced supervision of community hazards." She straightened her shoulders. "Including dangerous animals. It's plastic, Karen." She ignored me completely. "And while we finalize the paperwork, I'll be monitoring your yard myself. Monitoring, I repeated. Like you monitored it yesterday, her lips twitched. Don't mock me, then stop saying things that mock themselves. She sucked in a sharp breath, spinning on her heel like she couldn't stand another second of my existence. But before she walked away, she threw one last threat over her shoulder. You haven't seen the last of me. She was right. I hadn't. Because that night, Karen decided to retaliate. It began just after sunset. I had settled onto my couch with a movie playing quietly when my phone buzzed. A notification from my newly installed motion sensors, one of the smartest decisions I'd made since purchasing my home. Motion detected backyard gate. My stomach nodded. I tapped the live feed. There she was, Karen, dressed in black leggings, a dark hoodie, and gloves, like a discount ninja burglar from a sitcom that didn't get renewed for season 2. She crept into my yard with exaggerated caution, as if she expected the fake alligator to leap out and wrestle her to the ground. Every few steps she glanced toward the pool, flinched, then scurried closer to the patio. What the hell are you doing? I muttered to myself. My system sent another alert. Motion detected patio area. She knelt down near my storage box, rummaging through something I couldn't see clearly. Probably looking for a way to destroy the gator, thinking she'd heroically save the neighborhood from a predator that had never been alive in the first place. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and dialed the non-emergency police line, though in that moment it felt plenty emergent. Hi, this is the homeowner who had the trespasser incident yesterday, I said. She's back. On my property. Right now. The officer on the other end sighed the tired sigh of a man who recognized a repeat offender. We're sending someone. I kept the live feed open as I waited, watching Karen tiptoe around my backyard like she was trying to avoid pressure plates in a museum heist. At one point, she even picked up my pool skimmer and prodded the alligator, cautiously ready to flee if it so much as bobbed wrong. She was muttering to herself. My cameras didn't pick up every word, but I caught fragments. Dangerous, illegal, can't get away with this. I'll show him. HOA authority. She was spiraling. Full meltdown mode. It was almost impressive how far gone she was. Then headlights rolled onto my street. Karen didn't notice at first, too busy trying to pry open my pool chemicals cabinet, which was padlocked for a reason. But when the officers stepped into my yard with flashlights, she froze like she'd been hit with a tranquilizer dart. Ma'am, one officer called out, step away from the storage box. Karen slowly turned eyes wide, mouth opening and closing like a goldfish trying to explain itself. I was doing a safety check, the officer raised an eyebrow. At 9 o'clock at night, yes, she said weakly. Nighttime hazards require nighttime inspections. That's not how inspections work. It is if you care about the community. The second officer crossed his arms. Ma'am, you were warned yesterday not to come onto this property again. Karen's voice pitched upward. But he set a predator loose. It's plastic. You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw. The officer pointed at my security camera above the patio. We did see. Your neighbor has full video of your trespassing. Karen spun toward my house just as I walked outside. She pointed at me with all the fury of a villain who just realized the movie wasn't going her way. You, she shrieked. You're trying to sabotage me. You're trying to turn the whole community against me. You're doing that yourself, I said calmly. She tried to lunge toward me,